Hi, everybody. Welcome to Food for Thought. I'm here with Peyton Williams. This is our weekly program on Thursdays at noon on Zoom. We are happy to see you here. We have an exciting program, I think, in store. I'm delighted to welcome Celia Quillian. Welcome, Celia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today.
So, Celia, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Celia, some exciting things. She has been featured as an expert in AI by Time, New York Post, Wall Street Journal, Today Show, and more. She is the creator of the popular TikTok and Instagram channel called at Smart Work AI, where she teaches how to make AI useful for your life, both at work and in at home. She holds a bachelor's degree from Wake Forest, an MBA from Emory Goethe Business School, and most important, a high school degree from the Westminster Schools. Welcome, Celia, and I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how is it that you came to work in the field of AI?
Sure. I think you covered a lot of it. I also currently work at Greenlight Financial, which is a debit card for kids and an app that helps parents manage kids' money as a director of AI and growth. I kind of found myself in the AI space a couple of years ago when ChatGPT first came out. I immediately fell in love with the tool, started playing around with it, within the first couple of weeks of its launch, and noticed that there were a lot of people online talking about these tools and making them sound way more complicated than I think they actually are. So I started this TikTok channel as a creative outlet at first to kind of hold myself accountable to learning and teaching people as I learned as well. And it took off from there. And since then, the past 2 years, I've just been all in on AI everything.
That's awesome. So here is her book, which Peyton and I have just finished. And the truth is, it's extremely useful. I have been using ChatGPT myself just in my life daily for just maybe 6 months or something. I had no idea. I was bumbling around. And so I have learned so much by reading this book. And I think just to start us off, Celia, could you give us a 2-minute primer? What is generative AI? And maybe could you include some of the useful vocabulary that we should all know?
Sure. So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is kind of an umbrella term for any time that a computer is able to do something that would typically require human intelligence. Generative AI has come about in the past couple of years in the mainstream. That's why everyone's talking about AI now. And what they are is effectively a tool that can generate new content for you based off of your human language input. It's able to do this because it has been trained on a lot of different data to recognize patterns in human communication. And that effectively makes it really good at communicating back to you and very knowledgeable at about a wide variety of topics and very good at generating back to you things in a format that you want. It's basically a very, very advanced autocomplete. That's the best way to think about it. Unlike Google search, it's not crawling a database and finding an answer for you and spitting it back out. It is quite literally just predicting the best possible answer based off of the things you put into it.
Wow. Wow. So one of what I really realized by reading your book is that it contains a lot of prompt strategy, which is really the main thing that I was completely ignorant about. Can you tell us what is a prompt and maybe throw in what's a hallucination?
Sure. So a prompt is the communication that you put into the text field of a chatbot, an AI chatbot like ChatGPT. It is effectively how you are talking to the computer, the program that you're using. Um, it looks like a Google search bar, but it's so much more than that. Instead of just typing in a couple of words that you would typically do when doing a Google search, prompts allow you to put as much context and information into the tool as possible so you can get the best, most personalized result back out. The thing that I always say that's most important to use these tools is the more context you can provide about what the situation you're in is, what your goal is, what challenges you faced, the better the response will be catered to you. But to not overthink it too much. These tools are conversational. It's like talking with a really expert on any kind of subject that you can imagine for the most part. And if you kind of put on your imagination cap and pretend I'm just talking to a person, let me get their advice, let me give them all the context a person would need to be able to effectively respond to me, you'll get better results. And as to hallucinations, that's an important thing that I always speak about to keep in mind with these tools. They are predictive, they are trained off of a lot of information, but all predictions are not 100% of the time always act and completely correct. So when working with these tools, it's always important to keep in mind that something that they might generate back to you might contain some misinformation or some information that's slightly off. So it's always best to fact check results that come back, especially in important, like in academic settings or in professional settings, because there might be some nuance in what it's predicted back to you that may no longer be correct or maybe inaccurate because it's not within its training data to begin with.
So what do you do if you open up Chat GPT, the free version, and you ask it a question and it gives you one of those lovely kind of four paragraph bulleted answers? What do you personally do to fact check?
Yeah, so there's actually the great thing about the free version of ChatGPT now, as well as the paid version, and really all of these tools, save for a handful, they actually browse the web now. So if you ask for a question that's about something more timely, or if you say specifically browse the web, it will go and send off an agent, a little computer, to go and do its own little web search, find what it finds, summarize those results back for you. So in that situation, I always click through on those links and make sure the information that's provided is within that source. And then otherwise, I generally always just suggest do a quick Google search to fact check, especially anything really specific. Like a good example is if you're asking about, the tax laws of 2025 and like what deductions mean and like what they are, it's tax season, right? It might generate, back a response that is based upon data in its training set from like 2023. So the number that it provides you may not be completely accurate, but you can go to a trusted source to verify. It's really just a great way to kick off research, but not to take anything it says as like 100% true. Now, when you do fact check, oftentimes you'll find, wow, it was correct. That's great. But occasionally you'll run into a situation when it's not, and that's why it's super important to always do that.
Hmm.
Right.
Julie,
So
oh, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I was
Peyton has a
gonna say,
question.
I'm thinking, I'm sitting here and I'm going, okay, all this stuff is super helpful for me. And I read your book and I love the ideas about like all the prompts and the different, things you can do. Are there things so, like fact checking is not something that kids normally do. Is there anything like as a parent I can do as my kids I know are being exposed to this tool that might be helpful? Or that you feel like, oh man, if kids don't know this, they're going to be toast?
Wow, that's a very big question. And I think it's the same, it's the same kind of critical thinking skills that we have to instill in our children generally. Like this was been around since before AI, right? Everything you see on the internet may not necessarily be correct. Everything that someone at the dinner table states about life, if they're not an expert on it, maybe they're making something up too. So asking those questions and teaching them, well, this is the process. This is a specific number that it generated. Let's Google do a quick search and verify it across that. I think it's about creating that pattern of just not completely outsourcing your thoughts to the AI, but also digging in and critically thinking with it. Because what I say too is these tools are not, they're great at outsourcing a lot of the tedium that you have to go through in your daily life, but they work best when you collaborate with them as well. So if a response is not according to exactly what you'd like, you can always give it feedback. You can dig in, you can ask more questions. And sometimes if you know something for sure and it does get something slightly wrong, you can say, well, okay, but what about this? And usually at that point in time, I might go, you know what? You are right. I did do that wrong. They've gotten better with logic, but these tools for a long time were not very good. An example is if you were chatting with one of the earlier models and he asked, I have two sticks. If I cut them in half, each of those two sticks, how many stick ends do I have left? It would usually say, like something that seemed right but would not be because if you actually visualize the stick, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It would say 6 oftentimes. So that's a perfect example that you might use to show them, for example, this is what I mean when it is can make things up. So this is why it's important.
I heard that word collaboration, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week, Celia. Since this is a parenting program, and AI could sound a little bit scary to a parent who has young children in the home. Can you kind of describe what would be a healthy approach that a parent could take with a child, say, fourth, fifth grade and up?
hmm I would say introducing these tools by sitting alongside them, not giving them, unfettered, unlimited access to them, mainly because you can ask it about anything. And and also if you say I'm a child, it might respond and explain things as if you're talking to a child, but you don't have control over what it is generating. These tools have, depending on which one you use, they may have inherited bias about different topics that you may not want to expose your kids to yet, just because of the training data that it was trained upon and the people that refined the prompts. But I think the best thing to do is to sit down with them and start exploring together. If you're working through problems, for example, in a homework situation, maybe you don't remember the nuances of United States history in this one period of time, and they're struggling to understand what was happening. You can sit down with them and show how you might ask questions to better explain it. Say, I'm sitting with my 10-year-old, I'm trying to explain to them exactly the events that happened in the American Revolution time according to standards of what they might be being taught at this age. Can you help me better break this down for them and explain it? And they can see how it works, and you can do that fact checking together and say, okay, let's dig in and let's learn more about this. These tools are also great at creating creativity. So another fun way to like expose them to that idea is sitting down and helping it come up with a fun arts and craft project you could do together, for example. But I do think at early ages, until they have you're okay with them having a phone of their own and having unfettered access to the internet, it's best to sit down with them and do that as a pair versus letting them just have full reign.
Love that answer. Um, I was going to read on page 161. I think you gave a very interesting prompt for just helping with homework. I think when you buy this book, you're going to see that these prompts are way richer than you may have thought at the beginning. That many of the prompts that she gives examples of in the book are um, 4, 5, 6 sentences long, rather than just one simple question. So here it is. My 11-year-old son is learning about photosynthesis in his science class. I barely remember or understand the science behind the topic myself. I need you to, number one, explain the process of photosynthesis clearly to me. Provide me with a relatable analogy or metaphor that I can explain to my 11-year-old. And three, suggest an activity we might do at home to help make the lesson stick. Wow.
Way
That
better than a Google search.
It's so much better than a Google search. I mean, why bother with a Google search ever again?
Yeah, I feel like for me, I've used it. I just used it this morning. My mom and I were talking about we're going to have 9 cousins who are ages 11 through 3 over. We're going to do a little activity. And she was like, do you have any ideas for an activity we could do? And I was like, I don't have the time to think about this today. So I just was like, ChatGPT, you're a party planner for blah, blah, blah. Here are the ages of the kids. Give me activities we can do outdoors with this kind of materials, that are appropriate and very active. And I was like, make it an hour long. It gave me a timed breakdown of a party that was appropriate for kids. And I'm like, for Google, it might be like, okay, let me look up something specific. But for
Mhm.
ChatGPT, especially as a parent, it's like all those questions that I have that I want something general. It's super helpful.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens. It can provide knowledge, but also provide that creativity alongside it and customize it to you. So even in your arts and craft example, you could say like, I have these materials at home. I don't want to buy anything new. What can I do with these things that I have available? And it will cater that answer to you.
Yeah.
When it was election season, at a suggestion by a friend, put a referendum that I had to vote on into ChatGPT. And I said, please reword this as if I were 10 years old. And literally, I understood what that gobbledygook was that I was supposed to vote on.
Yep. Becky, I did the same thing.
I did that too.
And give me the pros and cons of each side's viewpoint about this so that I could make my own decision. So and okay, it's all like I feel like we could rave forever and ever around like, wow, look at the amazing things that this can do. And that's what we want our kids to do, right? We want them to be excited, we want them to be able to use it. I'm sure that in 4 years my kids are going to be rolling their eyes when I'm like, I remember when my parents were like, how do you use this cell phone thing? And I was like, I don't want my kids to be like that with me. I want to be like, yeah, I know how to use my cell phone and my chat GBT and all that. But there are things that are not great that can be kind of scary about AI. Are there any things, one of the things I heard about recently that just blew my mind and freaked me out was one, just the amount of cheating that kids are tempted by because it's so easy. And then two was like the ability of AI to put, faces on images that aren't, like the kind of taking images and then manipulating them in a way that might not be really all that awesome. Can you speak to like any updates in like what tips for handling that as a parent or what we should talk to our kids about with that as they get older? Obviously, I'm not going to talk to my second grader about that, but maybe my fifth grader.
Yeah, I mean, and this is like a lot of these bigger tools like the chat GPTs and everything else, they won't let you like manipulate images directly. But there are tools out there that you can find, right? Like unfortunately for every well-meaning company out there, there's someone trying to chase a quick buck that can allow people to really easily Photoshop manipulate an image of your child, which is scary. So I think that, from one standpoint, this rules about safety and talking with people and like trusting them, not giving them your photo, your information, any sensitive information. I think what was the other thing you mentioned? Uh,
Cheating.
oh yeah, the cheating thing. I mean, that's huge. First of all, I think and any teacher that you talk with will say, we can tell, like they can tell if the kid is struggling in class, but all of a sudden the homework comes back and it's perfect, and the writing is succinct and there's no spelling errors. It's very clear. And the other important thing is too, just like, and it's difficult to have this conversation with a child, but if you learn to outsource all of your thinking to an AI and you're not using them in a collaborative way, you're using them as an outsourcing all of my work and all of my thought way, that's not going to prepare you for a future where you'll be able to succeed. It's not going to you're not going to be able to use your unique skill sets, develop your own skill sets to have a career that you love, to be successful, to communicate with people effectively. And furthermore, again, like a good teacher will care enough to go, I know that you're cheating, or like this something is not up and we'll talk about it, but not every teacher does that. So it's kind of like that holding them accountable and knowing that if they are using something in that way, that you also intervene as well.
So, a case in point, I'm taking a class at Georgia Tech this semester, and there's 20 students in the class. We have to write an essay and submit it every Monday, 400 words, and I can see them. I can see everyone's responses, and they are beautifully written. And the teacher has said in many instances, I know when you're using AI. Please don't do it. But yesterday, she went ahead and had a 20-minute exercise in class where people had to write to a prompt. And so it really is the smart teacher's way of checking how does what they wrote in 20 minutes match up with what they're giving me on a weekly basis. Very smart. I talked to my son also in this industry, and he said it's really a tool just like spell check. We all learned how to use spell check. We all learned how to use search. It's something that everyone needs to master as they go through their education. But I did ask Celia about privacy.
Mm.
So if my teenager who isn't really thinking uploads, I don't know, something private, maybe their grades or their resume or something with their name on it, will it be attributable to them? And will I be able to ask ChatGPT what grades Peyton Williams got last month?
All good ones.
Yeah. So at this point, if ChatGPT, I've read their terms very thoroughly. I've used them regularly. It will not. So when you upload a document into ChatGPT or a spreadsheet or an image, it's storing it temporarily only so that the tool may process it and be able to summarize information and help you out. But that part of the document you upload is not being used for any training data. However, the risk of putting in really sensitive personal information like bank social security numbers, bank account numbers tied with your name, all of that detail into a chat, into the like inputted prompt, is that these companies, especially ChatGPT, the free version and the $20 a month version, do say that we may be able to train on any of the conversations that you have. Now, what that means is they're anonymized, but that date, that string of text is still there. It's basically making it so that the model is even better at understanding and comprehending how humans communicate, so that in the future they can be even better about engaging with us. But the risk becomes, in the future, someone might ask very specifically, like, what was Peyton Williams, blah, 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 blah. And maybe there's only one source of information in that training data and it somehow made it into the weights. And then it might in the future possibly predict an answer for someone else. But the larger concern there is any cybersecurity risk. If you put any sensitive information anywhere online and it's stored in any way, there's always a risk of someone hacking into that system and exposing that personal data. So it's best to anything hypersensitive not put in, but when it comes to like attachments or documents, at least for ChatGPT, it does not store that information. If you use a different AI tool, I can't speak to that directly, but cool thing about ChatGPT is if you take those terms or link the terms and say, hey, summarize the terms of service here. I'm concerned about this. What does it say about that and where? It'll be able to summarize it and point you to where so that you can understand what you're dealing with.
So
Wow, that's crazy.
So my big takeaway is if I'm going to put anything in that maybe I don't want on the internet forever, or I don't want searchable, upload it as either an image or a PDF or a document that it's using in the chat, but I'm not typing that stuff in, correct?
Right, but I would still avoid putting any, like I would
It
not
is.
attach a document with your social security number. I mean, it's just a matter of safety, but and again, if you're putting it in, no one's going to be able to search it, but the possibility of it ending up in the training data, and then maybe if someone asked a very specific question to generate a response, it would use that. A better example is in like a company situation, if you have really proprietary like code for the company that you software engineer for, or really proprietary business structure plan strategy frameworks or whatever that your company exclusively uses. If you paste that into ChatGPT in the future, it might go, oh, that's a really, I'll use that to give responses to people in the future about how to effectively strategize. It won't be word for word what you said, but it has a possibility of following that similar structure the more the training data expands.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
really helpful. One question.
And I did speak with somebody also in the field at a tech company who told me that he is not even permitted and is completely blocked from using any publicly available AI tools at work. That there are many, many tools available to him at work, but they have all been purchased and they're proprietary and they are behind walls. And so all this stuff that we're talking about with these free versions and public versions, that's not what they're using at work.
Hmm. Exactly. Yep. Greenlight is the same way where we have either contracts that say we won't train on the data or we have our proprietary software within the company.
Yeah. Well,
So
one last question. What advice, Peyton mentioned this earlier, what advice do you give to our parents here and really just on a personal level and as a parent to stay updated, to adapt to this rapidly changing platform? What should people do?
Yeah. So generative AI, obviously, very fast-growing industry. There's the chat GPTs of the world, the really big ones, but more and more companies are springing up regularly. I think there's about 67,000 in this space right now in some way or another. Good news is all of them leverage that similar prompting technique to get something back and that conversational work. I think just as like a baseline, find a tool like ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot to get started with. If you haven't started engaging with these, try it for yourself. I think using it as a replacement for a Google search occasionally just to get started, or as a replacement for brainstorming or any of those use cases in my book to form a habit with learning how to engage with them and what they're good at and what they aren't is a great place to start. In terms of staying updated, things are changing constantly, but they're not changing that much at the same time. So I think getting that foundation of building that habit of engaging with these tools and learning what they're good at and what they're not good at, and also in working with your kids supervised so that they learn that as well is very valuable. Staying updated, there's a newsletter I subscribe to called The Neuron that I love, but it sometimes gets, yeah, it's a great newsletter. And it does like a quick, like, high level summary of like what's changing in the AI space. But I think the main thing is if you're not engaging with generative AI now, start because you'll find and unlock whole new use cases that can help you be more productive, help you save more time, and help you learn about just what world we're entering into with this stuff.
It's
Awesome.
awesome.
Yeah, we had
I have linked to the book right there in the chat. I think that's the first way. Go ahead, Peyton.
I was just going to say there are two questions in the chat that I think are pretty interesting. The first is about math homework, right? How it's super helpful. It doesn't just show the answers, but it also explains the thinking and the thinking process,
Mhm.
and like trial and error and all that kind of stuff. But how do you make sure that your kids don't become too dependent on that?
Wow, that's a good question. Again, I think I think it's helpful for explaining it when they're stuck, but it's not that when you're trying to learn, you shouldn't replace that with it. So if maybe you turn to it after they've struggled for a bit and you go, okay, let's see if we can figure out what's going on. You could also prompt it to say, exactly explain, I'm trying to work through this problem. Can you speak to me as if I'm a tutor? Do not give me the full output of how to solve for it. Like just approach it step by step and then ask me questions as we go. Um, and also I think the important thing to note too is, especially when it comes to far more advanced mathematics, these tools have gotten way better at simple math. These tools are not calculators. They're just predicting the best possible thing. So if you were to totally outsource all of the math homework problems to it, especially as you get into more advanced levels of math, depending on what model you use, the number it gives back to you at the very end of the day may not be the exact correct one. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But in terms of like walking you through and helping it, if you prompted to say, don't give it all away at once, like help me work through this, that can be great. There are also specialized tools that are better at math. But I would say don't turn to it as a crutch immediately. Let them, the struggle of the learning process is what makes things click. So I don't know how much you can prevent
No,
a
that's
caveat to
fabulous advice.
that.
Do we
No,
have time for
that's
one?
awesome.
Do we
We
have
have time for one more.
Okay, great. One other person's question was about, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Celia, where you talked about whatever you put in is kind of then being used for training. But are we giving away things for free? Like, when we have, like for our own opinions and things, like, right, a lot of people pay money for our opinions. And when we put stuff in there, are we just like, what are we sort of giving away in the name of convenience and freedom?
You're giving away the if you're using a tool that does train on data at the plan level you're on, you might be giving away what is called weights. Like you're giving away like this term is could be associated with this term, and the models that will be built in the future might be trained upon that information. However, you'd have to engage with it on that specific topic like nonstop for it to be enough volume for it to potentially make it in the training data. I think the bigger question is, these tools are trained off of basically the contents of the internet. There's a lot of controversy about that fact. They didn't necessarily have permission to train it on the books and the all the copyrighted materials they did train it on. So, take that with what you will. I think that you'll be better off engaging with them and enhancing your ideas than you will trying to store them and keep them to yourself because they can be great collaborators. But I wouldn't be too afraid of feeding the beast for free because unfortunately the beast ate whatever it when it wanted when it first was built, I guess.
It's
That's
interesting.
awesome.
Thank you.
We are so thankful that you joined us today and shared your expertise. I'm awfully proud of you. I remember when Celia was in fourth grade. And so it's really fun to see where your career has taken you. And it's an exciting career at that. I have linked to your book as well as to your Instagram, really your website, which is part of your TikTok and Instagram work. Tell me how many followers you have again.
A little over 180,000 across the two, I think. So
180,000 followers. That is so exciting. So, all of you, thank you for joining us today. And please don't forget that Peyton has recorded this program and it will be available. Tell your friends. I know that so many of us don't know where we're going with AI, and this is a great first start. So, thank you.
Really
thank you so
appreciate it,
much.
Celia.